Welcome to the Grove Church Online. My name is Kent. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm excited to announce that next week on August 30th at 9 a.m., we will be having an outdoor worship service. Now, all are welcome to come. Just remember, bring your own lawn chair or blankets to lay out on the grass. This is going to be a great time together as we envision what this fall is going to have in store for us at the Grove. We're doing this outdoor event to help facilitate the social distancing of those who come. Well, today we are in our series on Colossians called Enough. Last week, we saw what it means to honor God with your marriage. It's part of this section in Colossians that the Apostle Paul applies the new life mindset to our home and work life. He shows us how being a follower of Jesus affects our most important relationships. Now, as I mentioned last week, I first planned on covering the whole passage in one sermon. However, what these verses say are so revolutionary and so life-changing that I thought we needed to slow down a bit. This passage covers three main areas: marriage, which we covered last week, parents and kids, the family this week, and work life, which we'll cover on September 6th. This new life in Jesus we are being commanded to put on or clothe ourselves with affects all the relationships in our lives. And it will for sure change the way parents treat children and the way children respond to their parents. And if we're going to allow the peace of Jesus to rule over our hearts, this means that we will treat others the way He wants us to. So today we are going to focus specifically on how to honor God with our families. Let's take a look at what the Apostle Paul has to say about families here in Colossians chapter 3, verse 20. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. In the scripture, the apostle begins by talking about how children can please the Lord. Now, no matter what your view of God is or is not, I think all of us would want to know how to please God. He, after all, is the most powerful being in the universe who gives and takes away life. So, not a totally bad plan to know how and what pleases Him. Well, the Apostle Paul tells us that one thing that pleases God is a good family relationships. And this makes so much sense because God is a relational God. As we saw last week with marriage, and family is no different. It was His idea. He created it. He came up with the concept. So in the eyes of God, family is a really big deal. He didn't make us robots and we don't have feelings and just blindly act. He intentionally made us and created us in His image, and that image is all about relational. So it makes sense when the family's working well together in close community, unity and love, that it pleases God immensely. Let's take a look at the way children can please the Lord. Verse 20 says again, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Now, according to this verse, when children choose to obey their parents, they end up pleasing God. And you might ask, how does that exactly please the Lord? Well, it pleases the Lord because God is a God of order and not chaos. He's not fighting the man and enacting anarchy in the streets. In fact, Genesis describes Him forming the world out of an anarchist state, forming it into one of order and rule for man to tend to. Let's look a little more closely at the word obey. See, obey here means to listen with attentiveness, to respond positively to. In other words, to listen and follow directions. Listen and obey. Now, having defined that obeying involves active listening, I think that it's absolutely uncanny that every child has a perfected the art of hearing loss, especially when it's the voice talking to them as their parents. All children everywhere from all of time have magically learned the art of selective listening. I love my girls, but I have a rude awakening coming when they become teenagers. I already know. Just this week, I was trying to talk with the girls, and it was like I didn't exist or I wasn't saying anything. And this can be so frustrating. Now, my girls are young, yet they still need to know that when mom and dad speak, it's time to listen and obey. Now, to be fair, parents, all of us have had at some time a problem when we were young to listening. We could hear music from a mile away. We could hear our friends calling from down the street. but not a word from our parents in the next room. Yet God still tells us that it pleases Him when children listen and obey their parents. This is God's design for how kids are to function in the parenting relationship. This is our first point today. Children, obey your parents because it makes God happy. You may be a kid and think this guy is full of something. However, let me share with you a little perspective on your view of your parents and how it can change over time. Typically, at age 3, a child views his parents as everything. At age 7, parents are seen as important. Well, at age 13, parents are annoying. And then comes age 16. Parents are dumb. Totally stupid. Yes, I use the S word. And age 22, parents are starting to get a little smarter. And then at age 25, parents are wise. It seems like all children go through these phases. I know I can see myself throughout these phases. Well, let's discuss this question together now. Have you seen these phases in your life? Which of these phases resonates most with you? Here is something interesting to note. This passage of scripture never said that being an obedient kid was easy, but it is doable, or God would not have placed that expectation on you. However, we need to make a distinction between children obeying and grown adults obeying their parents. Now, the passage is not saying that parents are to be obeyed once a child is grown and living outside the home. However, the father and mother are still to be honored. You see, honoring is giving weight to your parents' thoughts and wisdom, not rolling your eyes at them or ignoring their thoughts. I love many of the things about the United States. However, there is one area that I find absolutely appalling: the way we treat older generations, and specifically our parents. I believe we are called to honor our parents for our whole life. That means you actively listen to them. However, it does not mean that you have to act positively on their advice once you are grown. Honoring your parents is so important to God that it's included in the 10 Commandments. In fact, it's the first commandment with a promise to those who obey it. I want us to look back at the motive for a child's obedience. This: for it pleases the Lord. Young person, you are not just obeying your parents because it's the right thing to do. You're doing it because you want to please God and make Him happy. You may say, why is it so important that I obey my parents and follow their directions? And that's a fair question. But before we share a few answers to this important question, there are a few things you need to understand. This is first, the Bible doesn't compel a child to blindly obey their parents in anything they ask. The second thing is, children don't have to obey a parent if they're being asked to do things that go against what the Bible teaches. Third, children certainly don't have to allow their parents to abuse them. Now, unfortunately, in these times, we need to make this abundantly clear. But having clarified those issues, let's take a look at the positive results of a child obeying their parents. When children obey their parents, first, it brings peace and unity and harmony in the home. Second of all, it demonstrates respect for the authority God has put in their life. And number 3, it reveals that Jesus is their Lord of their hearts. And 4, it shows they love God enough to please Him. Those are all good reasons to obey your parents. But never forget how obeying your parents brings God gladness and joy. Let's discuss this question now. Why do you think families are such a big deal to God? Now, let's move on to the role of the parents. Paul is not letting you off the hook here. He actually focuses on what parents are not to do. Colossians 3, verse 21. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Now, here the word father could be translated parents. I believe it does speak to both the father and the mother. It's important. They both have roles. However, it has a profound effect on our understanding of these verses when we focus on fathers. Now, the word here, provoke, means to stir up, to embitter, to irritate, to exasperate, to come down too hard. This doesn't mean that parents are never to say or do anything that makes their children feel mad or irritated. And here's the second way we can honor God with our families. Parents, nurture your child with loving discipline. No one likes being denied what they want. This will cause an unpleasant feeling in kids and adults alike. However, loving and godly discipline often irritates kids. Loving parents don't let their kids do anything they want. They don't let them walk all over them, and they don't allow them to disrespect people or things. Kids need boundaries and consequences. Now, having said that, we don't want our parenting to go too far the other way either. What this verse is saying is, parents, don't keep irritating your kids so much that they get discouraged. Don't keep hammering away at them so they end up disheartened. Don't keep nagging them all the time so they feel broken. Don't keep coming at them so they feel crushed in spirit. It simply talks about not losing control of your temper so often and so much that you are crushing the spirit of your child. This is an important lesson for parents, especially fathers, and I'm hearing this loud and clear. There are several remedies parents can do that can help a child to flourish. And I want to just go over 3 of them with you today. Number 1, don't ignore them. This is failing to show attention and affection to them on a semi-regular basis. Being home but not being emotionally available. This is tragic for a child. Not providing for their needs, not getting involved in their lives. See, parents who ignore their children either by not being there physically or emotionally create in them a deep-seated resentment. And the child may not know how to express or even explain the problem, but they usually feel unimportant and worthless if a parent is not available to them. Number 2, don't indulge them. This is tough, and this is the opposite extreme of ignoring them. Parents who give their children everything they want when they want it provide a fertile soil for a selfish and self-centered person. These children grow up entitled and truly believe the world owes them. They also don't have the ability to delay gratification because they have never had to do it. They end up with all kinds of unhealthy habits and addictions that control them. These children do not develop a spirit of appreciation or a sense of value. They end up living like a child in an adult body, enraged at people and the world for not meeting their every need, and they can't handle criticism or failure, and therefore they can't handle pressure, a job, or life. Children need to hear no sometimes, and they need to realize life can and will be difficult and maybe even disappointing. They need to realize that they can get up even when they're knocked down. If not, self-indulgence will frequently create a deep-seated and lifelong feeling of entitlement and resentment. Number 3, don't insult them. When a parent says derogatory, insulting, and shaming words, it can depreciate a child's worth and communicate to them that they are not important and not valued. Name-calling and put-downs create feelings of insignificance and produces poor self-esteem. These verbal scars, unfortunately, end up shaping how a child sees themselves, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Our influence in our kids' lives is huge, and we need to pay special attention to doing it right. So what can parents do, and fathers specifically, to take a more active role in a child's life? That's why I love how this verse emphasizes fathers. Well, first, make time for them. Nothing says I love you like hanging out together, spending one-on-one. And number 2, invest in them. We invest in what we love. In some cultures, they actually view kids as their retirement plan. How would you change the way you parent if your child were your retirement plan? Number 3, encourage them. Be their biggest fan. Cheer them on. Your goal is not to make them just like you. Your goal is not for them to make up for all of your shortcomings in life. I hear parents say all the time that if my parents had pushed me harder, I could have been something great. That's a big trap. Your child is a different person. Help shape who God created them to be and not what you want them to be. Encourage them. Number 4, model what you want to see in your kids' lives. If you want them to pursue God, then you pursue God. If you want them to honor God, you honor your God in your life first. If you don't want them saying bad words or dirty jokes, why don't you stop saying them? Unfortunately, our kids are a clearer reflection of us than we often like to be reminded, and especially for dads. You will see your best in them and often your worst. However, you control what you are going to model and teach them in this life. So that's in your hands. So let's discuss this question together now. What were the things your parents modeled for you? What is one piece of parenting advice that you have received? So what do you do as a parent when there's a broken relationship with your kids? Well, we need to understand that Jesus can bring about transformation to even this relationship through the gospel. We need to see restoration begins with evaluation. Where did things go wrong in the relationship? And where can you own your part of the failed relationship? Evaluation ultimately moves to confession. Confess to God where you've gone wrong, where you've gone off on your own way. Then confess to your child and ask for forgiveness. That's the hardest part. Asking for forgiveness will lead to restoration. This is the very heart of God that He's demonstrated to us in the gospel when He reconciled us back to Himself through Jesus. Remember, because of the new life we have received in Jesus, we are to honor God with our families. When it comes to family, Paul encourages children to obey your parents because it makes God happy. And parents, you're to nurture your child with loving discipline. This is how we can honor God with our families. Let's make Jesus known as we embrace His way of being a family, as we experience new life in Jesus together. Thank you for being with us today, and we will see you next week.